SPNN Studios in St. Paul, Minnesota. And we're just 3 blocks away from where approximately 260 babies were ripped apart from their mother's wombs this last week. And of course, Planned Parenthood being down the street. And we're going to talk about that since this week was some 40-some years of Roe v. Wade, where in the United States some 61 million Americans have been murdered, slaughtered. And we're going to listen to some of the rally that took place, some of the speakers there. I think you'll find it fascinating as to what they had to say and why they said it. And then we'll get into, hey, what's it going to take to change this whole situation with abortion? But before we get into that, you know, a couple other issues in the news. Well, I'm going to talk about the shutdown. There's some basic things. The government shutdown, you know, that took place. I'm not talking about the Vikings getting shut down. The Schumer shutdown, not the Eagles shutdown of the Vikings. Followed by the Schumer surrender. Followed by the Schumer surrender. Okay, so Schumer was trying to play the shutdown on the Republicans. It's their fault. Well, see, this is a math thing. And so if the Republicans are putting forward a bill and you don't vote for it, you've shut it down. If there weren't enough votes to get the bill passed and you voted no, then you shut it down. So there's no way that this shutdown could be blamed on the Republicans. It's those that vote against it that get the blame for the shutdown. Now, you know, as a conservative Republican, whatever that means, you know, I don't like all the spending going on either, and I don't like all the continuing resolutions taking place. But we're in this, the reality is we're in this stalemate. You have to have 60 votes in the Senate to pass a budget item, and the Republicans don't have 60 votes. But you're in the situation where the Republicans are in the majority in the House, the executive branch, and the Senate. So the Democrats need to compromise. Now, the Republicans have never had a supermajority, that's 60 people in the Senate, in order to end the House in a majority and having the executive branch. Never had that. So this is actually one of the very few times that Democrats have to be in the position of compromising. And the Republicans have already said, hey, we'll give up some stuff, but here's what you got to do in order to get that. And the real issue, I don't think the Dreamer thing is a real big concern with the Democrats. It's just being used for an advantage to try to get votes from illegal aliens and Dreamers and things like that. But it seems to be a drift that's going on in the Democrat Party, which is more of a, you know, Trump went with the American first, and the Democrats seem to be going with the America last. You take Betty McCollum right here in the 4th Congressional District, Minnesota. She's all about the Palestinians, and she'll spend time and travel over there for the Palestinians against the Israelis. And then, this is my opinion, and then she's about the illegals. And so where's her focus on representing her district? You know, the people in her district with the unemployment, the black unemployment, the Hispanic unemployment, just unemployment in general. And where is her energies to help with that? Well, Trump has done more to help with unemployment in the minority communities than Betty McCollum has, and he knows what to do about it too. So the Democrats seem to be on this Destroy America theme, and it's just something you got to watch out for. I mean, they're into this globalism, okay? And in order to be into globalism, you cannot have they don't want the U.S. Constitution. You have to have a corporatist or a governmentalist attitude where the government knows best, not the people. And that's the battle, really, what we're facing here in the United States, is away from a constitutional republic that our rights are from God to a corporatist government corporatist government form of government where the rights come from the government and from money from the corporations. So, you know, it's just out there. I mean, you can see it. You can tell that the Democrats are more concerned about other countries. And there should be concern about other countries, but the concern isn't, hey, you know what? Why don't these other countries have a First Amendment like we do and a Second Amendment? You know, they don't want that. They're pushing the other countries have your elitist run the country, and people don't have a say. All right. Well, let's talk about the Minnesota Miracle with the Vikings. You know, this is something I've seen over and over and over again in sports, and it's rightly done in the aspect. You know, we had a miracle. Minnesota Vikings had a miracle, and Casey Keenum was right to give the credit to Jesus Christ, you know, and Diggs was right to give credit to God. That, you know, and then you look at the play where the Vikings had that special play, and the guy had a wide open receiver, and this guy knew how to make the throw, and you know, it's just clockwork. This is not a hard throw, wide open, and the pass just doesn't get there. You know, so things like that, you kind of see the hand of God and the sovereignty of God working, and it's not going to happen today. You see, there's a verse in the Bible that goes, like water in the hands of God, so is a king's mind. He moves it however he wills. You know, God moves the king's mind however he will. Well, same with an athlete, and same with a play. And so it was rightly a miracle, but there's the other part in the Bible that says, and that I believe most Christian athletes also believe, is that God raises people up like he did Casey Keenum and Diggs and the Vikings in this situation, and he also lowers them, okay? And that part is not easily, that's not talked about because they don't interview the losers, you know, and the losers just, hey, today God decided that you know, the Vikings get the glory, and God gets the glory through the Vikings, and we don't, you know. But you saw it the next week when the Eagles beat the Vikings, and there was God saying, yeah, I did that for today. You won that one game, and this game, you know, you're out of it. You know, you got shut down. So it's just an interesting perspective, and that's more of a correct biblical position, you know, than most athletes or the press talks about when they give glory to God for the win. They're right to do that, but there's a lot of Christians on the other teams that are also giving glory to God because of his sovereignty and his direction in their life, and that may be they lose, or they may get injured, or they lose their job, or whatever, but God's hand is in all of that too. All right, and that brings us up to the pro-life weekend here. Pro-life week is that the sovereignty of God's hand is also in those 260 babies being slaughtered about 3 blocks from here in Minnesota last week. And what is God's sovereignty? What's he trying to show? Well, the number one issue is he's showing the depravity of man, that the mind is a terrible thing, and the mind will believe things and do things that I was going to say it wouldn't normally do, but the mind does, because this is what the mind normally does. And it takes a mind that is transformed, that is changed, that rethinks, and that's the same with the, what do they call it? Well, the sexual assaults, trafficking, sexual trafficking of women. It takes a mind change for people to see, hey, this is wrong. The people involved in that industry, the people that are exploiting it, it takes a mind change to say, hey, this is another human here that's being abused. This is an abusive thing. But the mind naturally goes to, it's okay. You know, I get some pleasure out of this. Somebody gets some pleasure out of it. Therefore, it's okay. And when it's not. But they think it is, and they will promote that, and it's a destructive behavior. So this mind thinking and God showing, hey, this is the depravity of man. This is how man dishonors God in his creation. And it's also a form of judgment. It's a judgment on a country. If you go through the Bible and the blessings and the curses and the covenants that are written there, you do these things, therefore your blessings. You'll have children, you'll have offspring, you'll prosper. These are the signs that I am with you if you do and if you follow me with joy, versus a duty versus a delight. Or have a delight in following God's ways versus a duty. And with the following God's ways brings this joy and brings this blessing. There's also curses in these covenants. If you don't, here's what's going to happen, okay, to you. And in my opinion, I mean, you know, and one of the curses is you won't have kids. And what's the number one thing happening in Europe, in the population, in the United States, and a lot of these first world, highly educated countries? They're not reproducing. They're not reproducing fast enough to maintain their level of population. They're going down in population. Therefore, they have to bring foreigners in who do not have the same values, the same constitution, the same beliefs. And those foreigners are coming in as a judgment of God on that nation. I personally believe that all the Muslims that are being brought in this country are a sign of judgment. They do not believe in the Christian God. It's a different God. Okay, and they will be here as a judgment against us. Now, the judgment that we're already killing 1 million of our population a year through abortion is already a judgment of God. And now it could be even worse, where, and we are finding a number of our citizens being killed by Muslims. But it's a judgment against us. That's how the Bible presents it. You know, you don't have to believe me. You'll experience. I firmly believe that our children and our grandchildren, and for some of you, your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they're going to be beheaded in the streets of this nation because of our immigration policy. And we're not doing anything, and right now, we're not doing anything about it. And right now, the Catholic Charities and Lutheran Social Services are making sure people that hate us come into this country and have no inclination of following our laws or aligning with our culture. Now, some of that's good, you know. I mean, there's a lot of bad things about our culture. And some of that's good that they're not going to align, but the worst part is they will end up killing our children and our grandchildren, if not soon enough ourselves. All right, so I just wanted to start off with that kind of basic frame and then we'll hear some of the speakers there. But I did not see, the local media was there. You know, I was in the front row, Channel 5 and Channel 4 were there, but I didn't see anything on their newscast. I could have missed it, could have been there. And actually nationwide, I didn't see much coverage of the pro-life march over the weekend. A lot of coverage of the Minnesota, or of the women's march. A lot of coverage of that. And there was far more people, in my understanding, at the pro-life rallies than the women's march at the nation's capital. Now, we got a probably one of the worst situations in Minnesota, and you got to look at it, Minnesota, this way. In this judgment context, think of who we have as our senators, our U.S. senators, Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith. Very abortion-minded women, and of course, Tina Smith being part of Planned Parenthood. And then you have Betty McCollum from the 4th Congressional District, and a very abortion-minded individual. This is what I call the Minnesota Mothers of Murder. Okay, these three of them. So it's kind of the trifecta, the 3 M's, the Minnesota Mothers of Murder. Yeah, I'll get a meme made up on that one. But, I mean, again, that's a depravity of mindset to say, yeah, it's okay, let's kill. It's bad news. Well, there's a gal, a mother that spoke at the rally. We're going to watch her video. Carla. A lot of people came out in the snowstorm, even though the weather was just terrible. A lot of people came out. But Carla's with Silent No More, and these women have fantastic testimony. So we're going to hear what she has to say and then discuss it on the other end.
Now, I would like to introduce a very special guest to you. Carla is a part of Silent No More, a ministry of post-abortive women and men. For 10 years, she has been sharing the truth and regret of her abortion for the benefit of others. Carla is from Hudson, Wisconsin. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you so much for coming out today to stand for life. You are a real testament to the dedicated and compassionate people who make up Minnesota's pro-life majority. I am here today to support women who want to see the ultrasound of their baby before abortion. Let women see their ultrasounds. Women are strong. They can handle the truth. Many women choose life after viewing the ultrasound. Abortionists know this and do not show them. Why? Because it's bad for business. I know because 27 years ago I had an abortion I did not want. I was 10 weeks along and was never shown an ultrasound of my baby. I never got to hear that little heartbeat. I know I would have rejected abortion had I been allowed to see my child. Before my abortion, I was shown a video of a bunch of red circles. We were told it was just a clump of cells. I was 10 weeks along, but the girls watching the video with me might have been 9 or 11 or 12 weeks along. We all watched the same video. We all believed the same lies. I struggled with depression, guilt, shame, suicidal thoughts, and I made one suicide attempt. After miscarrying and delivering my second child into my hand, I saw the truth for myself. This was not a clump of cells or a bunch of red circles. I sought forgiveness in Christ. I repented of my abortion and all the behavior that led up to it. I began telling my story publicly in 2008. 4 babies that I know of are alive today because their mothers heard me tell my story. I can't go back 27 years and save my child's life and mine from abortion, but I will never stop speaking out. I will be silent no more. MCCL's pro-life legislative agenda includes a bill to allow women to see their ultrasound. Let women see their babies. Show women the truth. Today, on this 45th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, let's all go forward with renewed energy and dedication to make a better day in Minnesota, where all babies, born and unborn, and their mothers are respected and protected by law. I would like to introduce you to my family. I have 4 children that are raising my husband and I. They are all here today. Joshua is 20, Sarah is 17, Nathan is 14, and Tim is 12. The baby that died in my abortion is named Aubrey. The baby that I delivered into my hand is named Jamie. And I had another miscarriage, and that baby's name is Lee. They are part of my family, part of my story, and I will honor their short lives for all of my days and look forward to the reunion that God has planned. I will hold them in heaven. I wouldn't be standing up here today if it weren't for God's grace and mercy in my life. He has given me this platform for my good and for His glory. My deepest pain has become my greatest passion. Thank you, and God bless you.
Yeah, what a story, what a testimony there of God's forgiveness. She saw that. She saw how her mind was. Even though tricked, her mind wanted to believe what she was being told. And she got God's forgiveness because she repented of what she did and turned to God. It's amazing that I still hear people say, oh, it's just a clump of cells. There's no scientist, there's no doctor out there in the abortion industry that believes it's just a clump of cells. They all know it's a baby. You know, this is about being bad for business, as Carla said. This is about, we got to tell them something different in order for the abortionists to make money. Because talking to the abortionists, they really don't care. You hear these abortionists that have come out and say how the business works and what they do. They don't care about the woman. They just want to make the money. You know, let's get rid of the baby too. That'd be better for society. You know, all these mouths to feed. So being told that it's just a bunch of red circles, a video that was fraud, boy, that's an issue. Maybe Carla could go back and sue for fraud on that. But, you know, the psychological effect of an abortion on a person, depression, suicide, anger, is a very, very real thing. And because it's not natural. It's not natural for women to go through abortions. They're not built to abort their babies. They're built to have babies. Okay? And I mean, can you imagine, you know, you have an abortion and it does affect your ability. It can affect your ability to have a baby severely if you decide later you want one. You know, so, you know, if you're going to want one later, you better have the one you want that's coming now, in order so that you're able to have one later. And of course, there's one gal that had a sign, "I'm a birth mother." That means she gave her baby up for adoption, okay, which is a wonderful thing to do. But there you are with all this information that were lies, and the abortionists know they're lies. And then you get pregnant again and you have a miscarriage, but this time you get to see the baby come out that's just supposed to be a clump of cells, and it's a baby. You know, arms, legs, eyes, brains, you know, head, you know, toes, fingers, you know, fingerprints, heartbeat, you know, and you the realization that you've been lied to is in one sense it's a severe mercy, you know, that you've gotten to see that no, it's not a clump of cells. It's a clump of cells with meaning and purpose, with a form. So, Carla, thank you for sharing those words of your tragedy to the people there. But even the fact that you understand that it was for God's glory and your joy in the deepest, darkest part of your life is a reality that people need to get to. And the faster you get there, that God is accomplishing His purposes in your darkness, and you find your hope in Him, you can get through these times, and your life can change and turn around. And as she said, it definitely has. So legislation, let's let women see their babies. You know, let them see the ultrasounds. And of course, the business and Planned Parenthood doesn't want these mothers to see their babies. They fight it tooth and nail. And the statistics are that if these women get to see their babies, 94% of them, abortion-minded women, choose to have their baby. Just a devastating impact on the abortion industry, and why so many abortion mills in other states have closed down, because they have to, they're forced to, the abortion mills show an ultrasound of the baby. You know, but even these places will go so far as, no, that's not a baby, that's just a clump of cells. But it looks like, you know, hands, feet, no, that's just a clump of cells. You know, it's bad. You know, in Planned Parenthood, these are not good people. These are not nice people. You don't get to talk to a doctor. The only time you see the doctor and talk to a doctor is when the doctor comes in for the abortion. The decision's already made. You don't get a decision with a doctor. I mean, it's unbelievable. Okay, some other things that happened at the, we're going to kind of get into some of the political end of what took place. Of course, they march out the legislators that are pro-life, and those people definitely need support, and you need to find out a pro-life legislator in your area or support one that's running. It's necessary, and I'm going to talk, you know, in the end, what it's going to take to end abortion in Minnesota. But it was interesting, you know, the big fiasco with Michelle Fischbach being appointed as lieutenant governor because Tina Smith, the Planned Parenthood, abortion-minded, murder your child, Tina Smith, goes to the U.S. Senate. So Michelle Fischbach, pro-life, ends up being the lieutenant governor, and now she, by the Constitution and the way I read it, she either resigns from lieutenant governor and keeps her seat, or she maintains, or she's the lieutenant governor and has to give up her Senate seat, but she doesn't want to give it up. But right now she's saying that both, and MCCL made a big deal about her both being a state senator and the lieutenant governor. It was just interesting, you know, the legislators are kind of chuckling back there. But so what is Minnesota doing? What is Minnesota legislation trying to do to end abortions in Minnesota? And Kurt Doubt got up and talked, and so we're going to hear what he had to say.
I would like to begin by introducing the highest ranking member of the Minnesota House of Representatives and a staunch defender of the unborn, Speaker of the House, Kurt Doubt. Please help me to welcome Kurt Doubt.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to join you on a day that we remember the lives lost to abortion and the men and women who have suffered as a result. Despite the predicted snowstorm, the crowd here today is evidence that Minnesota is a pro-life state. And I am very proud to say that you have elected a pro-life majority in the Minnesota House and the Minnesota Senate. As a result of those majorities, we passed some very important pro-life legislation this past session. Minnesota taxpayers now pay for a record high 43% of all abortions. So House Republicans passed a bill authored by Representative Mary Franzen prohibiting the use of taxpayer funds for abortions. And unfortunately, unsanitary conditions and untrained staff have been exposed at abortion clinics across the country. House Republicans passed a bill authored by Representative Deb Keel requiring Minnesota clinics be licensed and inspected. Unfortunately, both of those efforts were vetoed by pro-abortion Governor Mark Dayton, preventing them from becoming law. Despite the obstacle in the governor's office, we will not stop defending life. In addition to continuing to advance those two important issues, this year we will also focus our efforts on giving new moms the opportunity to view their ultrasounds. Abortion facilities perform ultrasounds prior to abortion procedures, but unfortunately, women are generally not given the opportunity to see them. We want to change that so new mothers can see their child. This past Saturday, millions of women marched across the country to advance women's rights. And while we support them in many of those goals, they fail women on one of the most basic, fundamental human rights. Again last year in Minnesota, nearly 10,000 babies were killed, and roughly half were women. Among them could be potential CEOs, groundbreaking scientists, loving mothers, and community leaders. Those girls deserve their most basic fundamental human right, the right to life. And that's why the work of MCCL and your participation here today is so important. We must be the voice for those vulnerable lives when others refuse to be. You can count on your Republican legislators to be a strong voice for the unborn and for our aging loved ones. Thank you so much for your unwavering support, and thank you for being here today.
Very good speech by Speaker of the House, Kurt Daudt. You know, some amazing things happened this last week. One, Donald Trump was the first president in years to speak at a pro-life rally. So I congratulate him for doing that. He has definitely had a change of mind from his stance in the past, just as Carla had a change of mind from her position in the past. I believe, from what I understand, you know, how Carla was deceived into this, that President Trump is deceived into that, and so are many people deceived into the pro-choice position, and or the abortion position where you kill your baby. But it was clear, and there was a point in Donald Trump's life where that changed for him, and he talks about that. And it'd be worth listening to his speech. You can just go on the internet and Donald Trump pro-life speech 2018 and listen to it and listen to what he has to say. Yeah, you know, not everything's perfect in what he says, but it's a lot further along than we've seen in quite a while. Now, I'm trying to change January 22nd from March for Life Day to call it the Day of National Mourning. Used to think of calling it the National Day of Mourning, but that's taken by somebody else. So Day of National Mourning. Because again, we're dealing with a situation where God is judging and has brought his judgment on our country. This is the judgment. We kill our babies, and other nations come in that are here to punish us. That's judgment. So it needs to be changed to a Day of National Mourning. So again, that will be one of the things. You know, the discussion has to change. The mindset has to change in what this is really about. This is really about the wrath of God against the nation. So let's, what I liked, what Kurt Daudt had to talk about is we in Minnesota pay for abortions. We pay for 43% of all the abortions. You as a taxpayer. I didn't realize it was that high, but we did have a lawsuit, Doe versus Gomez in Minnesota, where the Minnesota Supreme Court said taxpayers have to pay for abortions. But I don't know if that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. To me, this is a religious liberty issue, and the government can't deny you your religious liberties, can't force you to pay for something that is you're so vehemently opposed to on moral grounds, on religious grounds, and you know, that needs to stop. But why isn't this lawsuit happening? Okay, again, that gets to the solution aspect, and I'll get into that. The second bill Kurt Daudt talked about, unsanitary conditions across the nation. Now, he didn't mention it here, whether they were here, but you will find ambulances at Planned Parenthood every so often showing up. Planned Parenthood and the abortion mills here in Minnesota are not licensed or inspected, like he said. And I hope you realize that dog and animal veterinarian surgery places, they have to be licensed and inspected, but not abortion facilities. I mean, it's bizarre, you know. So do these women really care about these women? No, they don't. None of these abortionists care about women. They care about getting the money and having this means to get the money. And of course, a big emphasis is that Mark Dayton, you know, a Minnesota landmark. Again, that's a judgment against a nation, is because these people get into these positions of power. It's a judgment against a people group. And a guy like Mark Dayton and Tina Smith and Amy Klobuchar and Betty McCollum is God pronouncing a judgment on this people group here in Minnesota and saying, you know what? You're getting what you deserve. Okay? And again, we're going to get back and get into the results of how to change this, how to get not what you deserve. Okay? The third piece of legislation, viewing ultrasounds. Now, I guess I didn't understand this distinction, but I knew ultrasounds had to be performed, but I didn't realize that they found a loophole in the law that they didn't have to show them. You know, but evidently they don't have to show them, otherwise why would you push that law in there? So they're giving ultrasounds to women, but they're not telling them or showing them what's actually in that ultrasound. So they're not being able to see the babies at these Planned Parenthood facilities and other abortion facilities in Minnesota. So there's a difference between performing an ultrasound and actually seeing an ultrasound. You know, where the abortionist can, of course the doctor doesn't do this, as some assistant does the ultrasound and say, well, there's really nothing to see, it's just a blob of tissues. You know, you don't really need to see it at this point in time, don't need to see anything. We're just checking it out. You know, it's the position of the blob and, you know, what it's going to take it out of there and stuff like that. You know, so they got all their ways around it. But if they saw the ultrasound, they would say, oh, they would be able to see, well, there's the head, feet, toes, fingers, all that kind of stuff. 10,000 babies in Minnesota last year. 260 a week from Planned Parenthood, just 3 blocks up the street. And half of those are women. So this whole we care about women thing, it's nonsense. It just, let's go against what women do. Let's go against their physical nature, their human nature, and then let's kill some of these women, because half of them will be women. Okay, so let's talk about what's it going to take to change things here. Well, I think the number one place, it has to be in the religious community, in the people that say that they speak for God or they're acting on God's behalf. There has to be a repentance. There has to be a recognition by religious people, people who say they know God. There has to be a recognition that this is a judgment from God on this people group here in Minnesota. You know, what a lot of churches do is they talk about the love of God and how merciful He is, and He is. And God is love. He's the very definition of love. And He's so high above as the definition of love, we can't really define that love to the true extent that it is. But in that talk and in that definition of the love of God, they forget another characteristic of God. He's not just a one characteristic person. He's got multiple characteristics, multiple names. And one of those characteristics also is the wrath of God, which, according to the Bible, everybody deserves the wrath of God. That's what you start out with, is the wrath of God. Okay, so when you start from that position that everybody deserves the wrath of God, then you're going, I'm not any better than anybody else. I'm not any worse than anybody else. We're all starting in the same spot. There's no superiority here. We're all under the wrath of God, and we need His forgiveness because we mock Him. We don't even acknowledge He exists. And that's part of the wrath of God. The people that reject God's creation through abortion are under judgment from God. And so are people that don't do abortions. They're under judgment from God. A person that hasn't had an abortion is no better off than a person that has, as far as the wrath of God goes. Until a person repents and says, hey, you know what, I'm just as bad, or I'm not any better. I need God's forgiveness because I mocked God in every single way that I knew of until I found out about him, until he revealed himself to me. So that has to be the number one starting place in the people. Understanding the love of God, understanding the wrath of God, and that God's wrath is, the judgment is on the people of Minnesota. And it's got to come from the leaders in the church, the elders and the pastors, and they need to talk about it in that way. You know, right now it's, oh, we have abortion and that's bad. It's a little more detailed than that in some churches, you know, but it's, I don't hear it talked about as being a judgment from God. I hear it talked about as, hey, this is the depravity of people and this is our sinful human nature and this is the way we go, you know, but we don't talk about it in the judgment aspect, and that needs to happen. So the pastors need to step up, and there needs to be a challenge to other pastors. You know, my challenge is to the pastors is get 90% of your people down to the pro-life rally. Now, it would have been very, very difficult this last week, and that's understandable. But other weeks, it's not bad. You know, other years, it's not a terrible thing to get down there. And we need 100,000 people down at that Capitol, at that rally in Minnesota. That would make a difference, okay? But that's just the beginning. What's more important than the people at the rally is you need the people at your precinct caucus, okay? You need to get people elected who are pro-life, okay? In the governorship, in the Senate, in the House, you need to engage your community. That's what you're called to do anyway. Then you may be saying, well, it's political. Yeah, well, everything's political. Religion's political. Can you imagine, you know, what did Paul do? He said Jesus is Lord. He got beheaded for it. Well, Caesar's Lord. You know, you go out saying Jesus is Lord, you're in direct defiance to the kings of that time. Is it a religious statement? Absolutely. But it's also political. And so there is no separation of, everything's political. You can't even talk without words having gone through a political process that define the meanings of the word. And then it goes through another political process to change the meaning of a word. You know, oh, that's hot, man, that's really cool. You know, well, those meanings changed, you know, depending on the context of what was said. So there's always this political, everything's political. So get over it. Step up to the plate, pastors and leaders, get over it, realize you want to engage your community, this is a good way to engage your community. And you need to get the state reps, the state senate, and the statewide positions in the U.S. House and Senate, get people in position that are pro-life. And Minnesota hasn't done that in the majority. And that's one reason I believe we're under the wrath of God, under his judgment. And these abortions are allowed to continue on. Why is the Precinct Caucus so important? Because that's when groups of people endorse candidates for office. That's when they get support of political parties, and it's very hard for a candidate to beat an endorsed candidate from a particular party. You know, if you got two Republicans, one pro-life, one's pro-choice, and they're battling it out for endorsement, the person that wins the endorsement is most likely to win the primary to go against the other party's candidate. So that's why it's important. One, it saves a lot of time and energy as far as campaigning goes to get the right person in there. So the precinct caucuses is where you start to start electing people to higher office at the state rep level, the state senate, attorney generals, governor. That's the starting process. If you're not there that day, February 6th, be there at 6:30, go to the Secretary of State's website to find out the location of where your precinct caucus is. If you're not there that day, you're out of the process the rest of the way. You have to work a lot harder to be involved in the process and to influence minds and energies. Okay, this third area, the religious schools need to shut down on February 6th and on January 22nd. They need to shut down, and all these churches, religious schools, churches, they need to shut down and say, we're going to the pro-life rally, we're shutting school down, this is a civic engagement, we're going to teach our students how to be engaged in the community, get there, be involved, get down at the Capitol, and then get there at your precinct caucus, get engaged, and see what goes on. And then push your agenda, the things you want to see happen. And next week we'll do a show on what needs to happen at your caucus, in my mind. I'll give you ideas. So, I mean, really, that's basically it, you know. And we can see abortion, and if those things happen, and pastors need to talk about pro-life issues at least once a year on a Sunday, and support crisis pregnancy centers who are supporting women who are having crises, pregnancies that aren't planned, and are deciding to keep their babies. And so there's a number of crisis pregnancy services in Minnesota. New Life Family Service, Amnion, are a couple that come to mind that are there to help women out in these times and help them get counseling and sort through what's going on in their life, and letting them know that keeping their baby or giving their baby up for adoption is a great thing, and that these women will be very, very happy and satisfied that they made that decision. You know, women who have abortions really only have one, well, they have a couple options. Their conscience gets so seared that they flood it out, but they never really do. And the other option is just regret it. And they live that pain and they feel that pain. And then they just be angry and they run around with pink hats on their heads being vulgar, you know. And it's sad, but that's what it gets to. Okay, so those are the things. Okay, let's go through them again here. Just to line it up here. What did I have written down? Where is it? Get down. Call it a day of National Mourning. Get down January 22nd to your peaceful protests, marches, rallies, prayerful also. Get to your precinct caucus. Churches need to shut down their churches, shut down their schools. Every pastor that's in Minnesota needs to be down there at the Capitol and on January 22nd and at their precinct caucus. They need to set a vision for their churches and for their schools to get 90% of the people down there. They need to have a competition with other churches to say, hey, we're going to try to shoot for this many people. You know, will you join us in this effort? You know, the guys like competition. Women are competitive too. They like it too, you know. If people saw that it would send a message that they know it would do something, they would go. But there's no vision. There's very little vision in our churches. And then get candidates, show up your precinct caucus, get people endorsed and elected that support the pro-life position. And then when we have control of the House and the Senate and the governorship and the judiciary, because we need to elect good judges, judges with good, strong moral character. I don't think that's been happening. We don't know about our judges. And that's purposeful too. That's part of the whole deception of, you know, we don't want you to know about what's going on in our courts. We got our elite people, our special picks. Well, you know, you should find good people. People should find good people to run for the Supreme Court and the judiciary and get the right decisions going on, and finally they can decide when does life begin. If they decide that life begins at conception, it's a done deal. Abortion's done. It's over. And of course, science says abortion does begin at conception. Well, that's our show for today, folks. Next week we'll talk about issues you can raise at your precinct caucus to get into, and I'll teach you how to get going and how to get involved so that you can be effective. So we got any time left? We're ready there to roll the credits and stuff. Okay, folks, thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. Remember, if you don't stand up for other people's liberties, who's going to stand up for yours? God bless. Have a great week.
The days go by like the forest sets on fire, and the wind takes the kite as the firefly brings the light. You said to me that you wouldn't leave, but now I see that you're